Masechet Baba Batra Daf Yod Chet. We're talking about a case of two neighboring fields, and one of the neighbors wants to dig a pit on his side of the border. The Mishnah says that if I want to dig a pit, I have to remove it 3 tefachim away from the border because otherwise it will damage a pit on your side. Now everybody agrees if you currently have a pit next to your border, then for sure I have to remove mine 3 tefachim away from the border. That's what the Mishnah says. The question that was up to a machloket yesterday was, what if currently you don't have a pit on your land, anywhere near the border, and I come first and I want to dig a pit? So, according to Abaye, since you don't have a pit there, so I can dig mine right up to the border because it's not going to damage any pit on your side. You don't have a pit, so I'm allowed to. Rava, however, says, no, I'm not allowed to, because maybe one day you will want to make a pit near your border, and therefore I have to anticipate that, and I have to remove mine 3 tefachim from the border, and that way when you come to dig a pit, if and when you want to, then you will also remove it 3 tefachim from your side, but I have to do that already from now, and even if you have no pit, I cannot come right up to your border. That was Rava's opinion. He was more stringent. Now we're going to have a barrage of challenges against Rava. Let's see how he fares in responding to each of these challenges. Tashema. Marchikin et hagefet ve'et hazebel ve'et hamelach ve'et hasid ve'et haselaim mikotlo shel chavero shelosha tefachim o sad basid. Tamadika kotel haleka kotel somech. This challenge is from our very Mishnah that teaches that if I have a pile of olive pits or manure or some salt or lime or rocks that give off heat and fumes, all these things, if I have a pile of them and I want to store them on my field, I have to remove them 3 tefachim away from your wall because they could damage your wall. Or alternatively, I have to put a plaster on your wall in order to protect from the damaging and toxic fumes that these things create. So what can we infer from this Mishnah? That the reason why I have to remove it 3 tefachim from the border is because you have a wall there, and I'm not allowed to damage your wall. But what if you didn't have a wall? Then I would be able to place this pile of stuff right at the border, and so that would be a proof for Abaye that's permitted. Since you have no item there that I'm going to damage, I can put it right at the border. It's a challenge to Rava, because according to Rava, even if you have nothing on your side, I still have to remove it, right? So how will Rava explain this Mishnah? And the answer is La kileka kotel nami la samich. Vela mai kamashmalan, hakamashmalan dehane kashu lachotel. No, in fact, even if you don't have a wall currently, I still cannot put my pile of stuff right at the border. Now, if so, that's an agreement with Rava, but if so, then what is the Mishnah teaching? If no matter what, whether there's a wall or not, I cannot put my stuff right at the border, then why does the Mishnah say, mikotlo shel chavero, that I can't put it near the wall, if it's true, even if there's no wall? The answer is, the Mishnah is coming to teach us this very principle that these items are damaging to walls. If you put this stuff, they give out fumes, they're toxic, and they can weaken a wall. And because they can weaken a wall, even if you don't have a wall, you may want to build a wall in the future. And therefore, I have to anticipate that, and I have to remove these things. Move them 3 tefachim away from the border in case one day you want to make a wall, but in fact I'm not allowed to put it at the border no matter what, and this is therefore in agreement with Rava. Next challenge, Tashema. Marchikim et hazira'im ve'et hamacharisha ve'et meraglayim min hakotel shelosha tefachim. Tamadika kotel haleka kotel samich. The continuation of our Mishnah says that if I'm planting seeds or plowing or I'm placing urine in the ground, then I have to remove that from the border 3 tefachim. I can't put any of these things or plow 3 tefachim, within 3 tefachim of the border, because there is a wall, and these things will weaken the foundation of the wall. So it seems from our Mishnah that the only time I have to move it away is because you have a wall there. I can infer that if you don't have a wall, then I can do these things right up to the border. That's a challenge to Rava. La kileka kotel nami la samich. No, that's not true. In fact, even if you don't have a wall, I still have to move my seeds and my plowing away 3 tefachim. Velamai kamash malan. If so, then what is it teaching us? Why does it say that these things you have to remove from the wall? So what is it teaching? Why bother saying you have to move from the wall if it's true, even when there's no wall? Hakamashmalan de metunta kasha lichotel. Oh, it's teaching us that these items, the dampness or the loosening of the soil, is bad for a foundation of a wall. And that's why it mentions you have to remove them from a wall, because it's teaching us that these things will damage a wall. Now, even if there's no wall there now, you might want to dig a wall in the future. But it's important for us to know, is it damaging the foundation of the wall or the top part that's on top? Right? Would it make a difference if I put plaster on it? In the previous case, yes. In this case, no. Or is it damaging to a pit? So we have to know exactly what's the nature of the potential damage that it can cause. But in fact, I have to remove it even if you don't have anything there currently, because you could build something there later. Okay, next challenge. Tashemavet harechaim shelosha min hashecheb shema arba'a min harecheb tamadika kotel haleka kotel samich. The Mishnah teaches that I have to move my mill far away from your wall, and it has to be 3 tefachim away from the base of it, which is going to be 4 tefachim from the upper stone, which is indented more, and have to keep that away from your wall. So doesn't that imply that only if you have a wall, then I have to move my millstone within the border? But if you don't have a wall, then I would be able to put my millstone right up to the border, and that would be a challenge to Rava. No, in fact, even if you don't have a wall, I still cannot put my mill right at the border. I have to remove it 3 tefachim. So what is the Mishnah teaching? Why is it saying I have to remove it from the wall if it's true even if there's no wall? It's teaching us that vibrations, when you run the mill, it vibrates the ground a lot. And it's teaching us that is damaging to a wall. Because it's damaging to a wall, so for sure, if you have a wall, I can't put it there. But even if you don't have a wall, because in the future you may build a wall, it's your right. So therefore, I cannot put my mill there even now, which is Rava's opinion. Next challenge, Tashema. Veta tanur shelosha min hakalya, she'en arba'a min hasafa, tamadika kotel haleka kotel samich. The Mishnah says that if I have a pot belly stove, that's the thing, even nowadays, pot belly, because it's rounded in the middle, and I want to put it near the border. It has to be 3 tefachim from the protruding part in the middle of the stove, which is 4 tefachim from the rim of the stove, and I have to keep that away from your wall. Oh, can I not infer that it's because you have a wall? That's what I have to keep it away. But if you don't have a wall, then I could put my stove right up onto the border. Isn't that true? And that would be a challenge to Rava. No, in fact, even if you don't have a wall, I still cannot put this oven right at the border. So why does the Mishnah say because I have to move it from your wall if it's true, even if there's no wall? He's teaching us that heat from the stove is damaging to a wall, and it's giving the reason why I cannot put it up to the border. Even if there's no wall, you could build a wall, and then it would be damaging to it. And so we have to know the explanation. That's why it says because there potentially could be a wall there. Next challenge, Tashema. Lo yiftach adam chanut shel nachtomin v'shel saba'in tachat osaro shel chavero v'lo refet bakar. Tamadika osad, haleka osad abiyid. So we finished the challenges from our Mishnah, previous Mishnah. Now we're going to challenge from a Mishnah that's coming up on Daf Chaf that says a person cannot open a bakery or a dyeing shop underneath someone's storeroom of wine, nor can I open up a cattle barn there. So let's say I own the first floor and you own the second floor, and you have a wine storage facility on the second floor. And if I open up a bakery or a dye shop where I'm making fire and a lot of smoke, so that smoke is going to go up and seep into your wine and damage your wine. Or a cattle also makes a lot of bad smells, and that's going to go up into the wine. And so I'm not allowed to open a smelly thing downstairs if you already have a wine cellar upstairs. Now, we can infer only because you have a wine storeroom upstairs, That's why I cannot open downstairs. But let's say you don't have one upstairs, then I'm allowed to put whatever I want downstairs. I can open a bakery downstairs if you're not currently storing wine, even if in the future maybe you will, but right now you don't. And so we're comparing this to the two fields. It's the same thing. So just like in this case, I can open my bakery and make smoke because currently you don't have a storeroom, so I'm allowed. So too, it would be allowed if we have two fields. I could put something on my field right up to the border if you have nothing that would be damaged on your field. And that is a challenge to Rava. And the answer is Dirashaneh. Even Rava would agree that a residence is different. The things is my home. People would probably sleep in the same place that they worked. So if they had a bakery there, they would sleep there too. This is my home, and therefore people have more of a right to do what they want in their home. If you already have a wine cellar up there, then I cannot come and directly start causing damage to you when you already have a wine cellar. You have rights also. But if currently you don't have a wine cellar there, and I want to make a bakery, and it's not causing damage right now, so this is my home. So Rava would agree that I have more rights, and I can open that in my home. And in fact, makes sense that it's a correct explanation because we have a baraita about this Mishnah that says if the cattle barn was already there before the storeroom, then it's permitted, right? If you don't have a storeroom yet, then I'm definitely allowed. So you see that is explicit that it's permitted. And the reason of the distinction is when it comes to a residence, Rava would say you're allowed to do something in a residence if it's not currently damaging someone else. But in the field, you have less rights of things that you can do in your field, and therefore in your field you have to anticipate that your neighbor may put something there, and that's why you have to move it away. Next challenge, Tashema. Lo yita adam ilan samuch lesadeh, ela im ken irchik bimenu 4 amot. V'tani ala 400 shamru kedeh avodat hakerem. Mishnah later on says that I'm not allowed to plant a tree near my neighbor's field unless I remove it 4 amot. I have to leave 4 amot of space. That's the Mishnah. The Baraita explains further that these 4 amot, I need them so that you can work your vineyard. If I have a field and you have a vineyard, I want to plant a tree. But if in order to work your vineyard, you need 4 amot in order to bring the plow, to bring the wagon, and I have to allow you that room in order to do that. And if I put my tree right up to the border of the vineyard, then you won't be able to get your plow and your wagon through. Tamad mishum kede avodat hakerem, hala mishum kede avodat hakerem samich, v'af hagav deika sherashin dekamazke. So we can infer from this that the only reason why I have to leave space is so that you can have space to work. But if not for that reason, then I would be able to put my tree right up at the border, even though the tree has roots that are going to go underneath and cause damage to your pit or stuff that you have on your side. So you see here that I'm permitted to put a tree because right now you don't have anything there and the roots aren't there yet and it's not causing you damage right now, and therefore I would be, if not for the reason of leaving space to work, if it was just regarding the roots, I wouldn't have to worry about that. I could plant it right now because right now it's not causing you damage, and that would be a challenge against Rava. And the answer is, oh, this Mishnah is talking about a case where there's hard rock under the ground that is separating and the roots cannot penetrate that hard rock. They're protecting your field underground from my roots. That's the case that we're talking about. Now, if that seems far-fetched, that this is an okimta, that there's a rock underneath there, taikaname. In fact, look at the language of this Mishnah that continues and says, the katane, haya gader bentayim, ze somech legader mikan, veze somech legader mikan. That if there was a fence between, then I can put my plants, tree right up to the fence, and you can put your stuff right up to the fence. Over here, it's talking about the problem of kilayim. If we have 2 different species that cannot be planted together, you have to keep them far apart, for amot. But if there's a fence in between, then the fence serves as a barrier, earlier, and then I can plant up to the fence and you can plant up to the fence. Now, how will the fence above ground help? What about the roots? So what about the roots? It means that there must be a rock underneath the ground that's preventing the roots from coming into each other. And so this is actually a good answer, that there's no problem of the roots, and that's why the Mishnah says I have to leave 4 amot, but only because you need space to work. If not for that reason, I would be able to come right up to the border, but that's only because there's a rock underneath the ground. And we just proved that it really makes sense to explain this Mishnah, that there is a rock under the ground. We follow up, Look at the continuation of the Mishnah that says, if I planted a tree and my roots are going into your field, then you, my neighbor, you can go and dig up, cut off the branches down 3 tefachim down, so that you can plow, and you're allowed to just cut off my branches, even though they're my branches. They're in your way from plowing, and you can cut them off. Now, if you say we're talking about a case where there is rock under the ground that roots cannot penetrate, then how could my roots have gone onto your side? You just said that there was a rock there. Oh, here's what the Mishnah means to say. The beginning of the Mishnah, the first 2 clauses that we analyzed above, that's talking about where there is a rock underground. Now this clause comes and adds, and if there is no rock, and I planted a tree, and the roots did come onto your side, you have a right to plow, and therefore you have a right to cut off the roots from 3 tefachim down, so that it will not impede the plow, and so we solve that problem as well. Next, we have another challenge against Rava from an upcoming Mishnah. Marchikin et ha'elan min habor 25 amah. Tamadik habor, halek habor, samich. If I want to plant a tree in my field, I have to make sure it's 25 amot away from a cistern that you have in your field, because if not, then the roots of the tree will grow and they'll go under and damage your cistern. So we can infer from this that I only have to move it away from my border if you have a cistern on your side of the border. But if you don't have a cistern there, then I could plant my tree right up to the border, and that will be permitted. But this permits it, and yet Rava said that it's not true. Even if you don't have a cistern there, maybe one day you will make a cistern, and therefore I have to plant my tree 25 amot away from my border no matter what. But this source is more lenient. No, it could be that even according to this Mishnah, the inference that you made was not correct. And even if you don't have a cistern on your side, I still cannot put my tree within 25 amot of the border, because maybe one day you will build a cistern. So why does this Mishnah say away from your cistern? Oh, it's simply teaching us that the rule that roots of a tree can damage up to 25 amot away if there would be a cistern there. Now, even if there's no cistern, I still cannot plant it, because one day you can put it, and the Mishnah was simply written in this way to teach us the reason for the law, but in fact I have to keep it far away even if there's no cistern there currently. Hold on, how will you explain the continuation of that Mishnah that says, if the tree was there first, then the owner of the cistern cannot cut it down. In other words, if the tree came second, so your cistern was already there, and I planted a tree, then you have a right to come and say you have to cut down the tree because my cistern was here first. Right, and if the tree was there first, then the owner of the cistern does not have a right to say, cut it down. Well, if you agree with Rava that I was never allowed to put the tree in my field, even if the tree came first, it wasn't allowed, then why wouldn't the owner of the cistern have a right to come demand? The owner of the cistern could say, even though my cistern wasn't here yet, when you planted the tree, you still were not allowed to plant the tree close to the border. And therefore, since you did something wrong by planting the tree there, so you have to cut it down now. And even though my cistern came second, you still have to cut it down, right? If in fact the law is like Rava, then the owner of the cistern should be able to force the owner of the tree to cut his tree down no matter what. Oh, the Papa has an answer to this that's coming up in a different case, and we can apply the same situation here. We're talking about a buyer. In other words, I have a field and you have a field. I planted a tree in the middle of my field, far away from the border. So when I planted it in a permitted way. I violated no law, not even according to Rava. Then, after some time, I decide I'm going to sell half of my field to you. And the border now moves into the middle of my field, and so now you own all the land from right where I planted the tree and towards your field. Now that's all your field. All of a sudden, the tree that was once in the middle of my field is now on the border of my field. And in that case, then you come and you put a cistern there. And then you come and say, oh, look, your tree is near my cistern. Well, in that case, I planted it in a permitted way, because at that time it was in the middle of my field. Therefore, you cannot demand that I cut down the tree, because when I planted it here, it was not near the border. But in fact, if I did plant it near the border, that would be against the rule, according to Rava, and then the owner of the cistern would be able to force the owner of the tree to cut it down. Okay, we solved that problem. Next. Tashema. Marchikin et ha-mishra min hayarak, vet ha-kerishin min ha-besalim, vet ha-chardal min ha-devorim. The Mishnah teaches that if I have flax water is very toxic and it can cause damage to vegetables, and therefore I have to keep my flax water away from your vegetables. And also, I have to keep the leeks away from your onions. Leeks and onions are similar, and therefore, if they are near each other, insects will cross-pollinate them. The problem is that those seeds will be sterile. And so, putting the leeks near the onions will, in fact, damage them. And therefore, if I'm planting leeks, I have to keep them away from your onions. And also, mustard seed plants can cause damage to bees. If you have bees on your side and I'm putting mustard seed plants on my side, I have to remove those mustard seeds away in order not to damage the bees. Now, Tama di ikayarak, halek ayarak samich. Let's focus on the first one. It's only because you have vegetables there on your side of the border. That's why I have to keep my flax water away, because it's there. That's what it says. But if you didn't have vegetables there, then I would be able to put my flax water right up to the border. Challenge against Rava. No, in fact, even if you didn't have vegetables there, I would still not be allowed to put my flax water up to the border. And the reason why it says I have to remove it from your vegetables is to teach me that flax water is harmful to vegetables, and that's why it says it in that way. But even if it wasn't there, I would not allowed to put it up to the border, just in case one day you may put vegetables there. Yachiyah Masefa, Rabbi Yosef matir bechardal mipnei sheyachol lomar lo ad she'ata omer li harchek chardalcha min deborai harchek deborecha min chardali shebaot ve'ochlot ligluge chardalai. And so, if so, that I'm not allowed to put it next to the border, even if the other item is there, how will you explain that, even if the other item is not there, how will you explain the sefa? Where Rabbi Yosef disagrees only with the third case of the mustard and the bees. And he says, in that case, if you have bees there, and I come and put mustard, so you cannot force me to remove my mustard, because by the time you tell me, move your mustard away from my bees, I can tell you, move your bees away from my mustard, because the bees are causing damage to the mustard. They're coming and eating the plants. And so in that case, just like mustard seed damages the bees also damages the mustard plants. And so, since they damage each other, Rabbi Yosef disagrees, and he says, I agree in the first two cases. When it comes to the flax water is damaging the vegetables. The vegetables aren't damaging the flax water. So there, if I plant them, if I put the flax water, then I have to remove it. But in this case, since they're both damaging each other, therefore I do not have to move it. You move it. If you interpret this entire Mishnah in accordance with Rava, who says I'm not allowed to put a damaging thing on my side, not only if you already have an item on your side, but even if you have nothing on your side that will be damaged, I already have to anticipate that, and I cannot put anything even near the border. If that's the law, then how can you ever even come up with a situation that the Yosef is talking about, where you have bees on your side and I have mustard on my side? No matter who comes first, even if I put my mustard first, I have to remove it according to Rava. I have to move it far away from the border, and similarly, you have to remove your bees far from the border, because potentially the other person can put an item there that will be damaged. And so therefore, neither of us will ever have a right to put something near the border first, so that we will never come to a situation where I have mustard right at the border and you have bees at the border, that the BOC would say, well, these are damaging each other, unlike the other cases. You can never even come up with a case. So here, Amar Papa Belokeach. Here's what Papa actually said. This situation originally, we just copied it earlier. And Papa says we're talking about someone who buys a part of a field from someone else. So we're talking about a case where I have mustard on in the middle of my field, far away from yours. But then I sell you half of my field, and now once I sell it, now the border of my field is right. The border of our fields is right next to the mustard, and then you come and say, "Oh, look, I have bees over here," and that's the case where legally I put my mustard here legally, and now you have this claim. So according to the BOC, I have a counterclaim, and I can say I'm damaging you, you're damaging me, and we can leave it there. But that would be a situation, even according to Rava, where someone planted something near the border in a permitted way, because when he planted it, the border wasn't there yet. Hold on. If you're talking about a buyer, then what is the reason for the Rabbanan, who says in all of these three cases that the person who's getting damaged can demand that the damager move himself away? Why? How can you demand that of me when I put this flax water here or planted these mustard seeds here? It was permitted because it was in the middle of my field. Now you went and bought the space in between, and so now it's damaging. But since I planted this here with permission, you cannot force me to remove it. And so if we're talking about a buyer, then we cannot understand Rabbanan's law. And furthermore, we have a similar question regarding the Biyoseh for the first two cases of the flax near the vegetables and the leeks near the onions, where the damage is only going one way. Why would the Biyoseh agree in those cases that I have to move my flax water away? If we're talking about a case where I put the flax water in the middle of my field, far away from yours, and then I sold you half of the field and now it's nearby, but I can say, when I put this here, it was in a permitted way, and therefore you cannot force me to move it. So how can we explain all of these cases according to Rabbanan and the Biyoseh? If in fact it's talking about a case where I sold you the property in between, Ravina says it must be according to Rabbanan. We'll start answering for them, that the one who causes damage has to remove himself, even if he put the stuff there in a permitted way. It was in the middle of the field, but now that it moved and now it's close to your stuff, I am causing damage. The one who's causing damage has to distance himself. He's responsible for moving himself, and that's why, yes, even though it was done in a permitted way, I still have to move all of my stuff. Okay, so we can infer that according to the Biyoseh, who disagrees in the third opinion, and that would in the third case of the mustard, the Biyoseh must disagree and say that the one who is getting damaged has to remove himself. That's the logic there, that when the guy who has the bees say, "Hey, you're harming my bees, move your mustard," so I can say back, "Oh, I'm harming you, you're harming me, right? You should move out of the way because you're harming me just as much." And so there we see that the logic is that the one who is getting damaged has a responsibility to remove himself. And so the Biyoseh disagrees with Rabbanan. But if that's true, that the one who's getting damaged always has to remove himself, then the Biyoseh should apply that also to the first two cases. And the one who has the vegetables should have to remove himself far away from the flax water, and the one with the onions should have to remove himself far away from the leek. But Rabbi Yosef agrees in those two cases that the damager has to move himself. So in fact, it has to be that Rabbi Yosef agrees with Rabbanan that the one causing damage is the one who has to remove himself, and that explains his logic in the first two cases. And in the third case, this is what Rabbi Yosef is claiming against Rabbanan. I agree with you regarding the flax water and the vegetables, because the flax water is damaging the vegetables, and the vegetables aren't damaging the flax water, and therefore the flax water, a guy who's causing the damage, has to remove himself. But in the case of the mustard and the bees, they're both damaging each other, and therefore they both have an equal claim. And since they have an equal claim, they cancel each other out. It's not because that one damaged has to remove himself and the damager says, I can stay here. No, in fact, a damager would have to remove himself. But the problem is here is who is the damager? They're both damagers to each other, and therefore neither of them has a right that overrides the other right, and that's why he says they can both stay there. V'Rabbanan, now what was Rabbanan going to say to that? Devarim lecharda lameskile, I bebinta lamashkechale, I betarfa hadar pare. He disagrees with the reality of the situation, and he thinks that bees do not significantly damage mustard. What are you talking about? The seeds? Mustard seeds are so small, they're the actual paraditic example of something really, really small. What do you say? As small as a mustard seed. And so the bees cannot even find them, that they're going to eat and ruin the mustard seeds. And if you're talking about the leaves, it's true that bees can eat a tiny bit of the leaf, but it's only a little bit, and the leaf grows back. So it does not cause any significant damage to the leaf. And therefore, the rabbis say that the bee owner is not causing damage to the mustard owner, but only the other way around. The mustard does cause damage to the bees. And now a follow-up question. Is this really true what you just concluded, that according to Rabbi Yosef, the one who causes damage is the one that's responsible to distance himself? V'atenan. Rabbi Yosef omer, af al pi she'abor kodemet la'ilan, lo yakos, shezeh chofer betoch shelo, v'zeh noteya betoch shelo. In the Mishnah, coming up soon, Rabbi Yosef is of the opinion that even if the cistern is there first before I planted a tree, all right, this is based on the law that if I have a tree, the tree can cause damage up to 25 amot because the roots will go into the other guy's cistern. And therefore, according to Tanakama, the owner of the cistern can force the owner of the tree to cut down the tree. And Rabbi Yosef disagrees and says, no, he cannot do it. And even if the cistern was there first, nevertheless, the owner of the tree does not have to cut down his tree. Why? Because each one is doing what he wants in his field. You want to put a cistern in your field? Fine, go ahead and dig away. And I have a right to plant in my field, and I don't have to worry about what's going to happen. It's not like when I plant the tree, immediately it's causing damage. If it was immediately causing damage, then it's a problem. I can't directly cause damage. But when I plant the tree, the roots aren't there yet. It's only afterwards, after many years, that the roots go. So I don't have to worry about that. I can do what I want in my field. So we see that according to the Rabbi Yosef, it's the nizak, the one that has damage done to him, is the one that has to move himself. And so because the owner of the tree can say to the owner of the cistern, oh, my tree's bothering you? Okay, move your cistern far away. So therefore, Rabbi Yosef must say, al hanizak le'archik et asmo. Ela lam Rabbi Yosef al nizak sebir aleh. Ul divrehem d'Rabbanan kamar lehu. He really thinks that the nizak, the one that the damage is caused to, has to remove himself. And therefore, in our Mishnah, Rabbi Yosef thinks that in all three cases, the owner of the damaging item does not have to move. The flax water guy can leave his flax water there, and the leek guy can leave his leeks there, and just like the mustard seed guy can leave the mustard seed there. And when Rabbi Yosef in the Mishnah disagrees only with the third case, he was doing it lidivrehem, in accordance with the rabbis who say ala mazik. He was saying even you rabbis should agree with me on the third case, as follows. According to me, I think that the damaged party has to remove himself. And therefore, I think that even in the case of flax water and vegetables, the guy who owns the vegetables, he doesn't want to get damaged. He has to move vegetables away, and the flax water guy does not have to move his stuff away. That's what Rabbi Yosef thinks himself. And in the Mishnah, when he's talking, he's saying liditchu. But according to you, damritu alamazik, and you say that the damager has to remove himself. Tenach mishrav yarkad hane maskehane vehane la maskehane. Elachadad vodim tarvayu maskehadadeh. Fine. According to your logic, it makes sense in the case of the flax and the leeks, where one party is damaging the other, but not the other way around. So therefore, ala mazik, the owner of the flax sweater will have to remove himself. But even according to your logic, in the case of mustard and bees, where each are damaging the other, so no one has a higher claim than the other to say you're the damager. You're also the damager. You should agree with me that the mustard seed guy does not have to remove himself. So that's what Rabbi Yosef said in the Mishnah. Now, V'Rabbanan, how would Rabbanan respond to that? They would say, as we already did, Devorim lacharda lamaskile I bebinta lamashkachat I betarfa hadar pareh. That bees do not significantly damage the mustard. If it's the problem with the seeds are so small the bees can't find it. And if it's regarding the leaf will grow back. And that's why Rabbanan do not agree with Rabbi Yosef's logic. Baruch Adonai leolam. Amen v'amen.